What's going on, everybody? Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and whatever time it is. Welcome back to another video with you, man, Measureaholic. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 5 of my Parthian campaign for the Divided Impera overall mod for Total War Rome 2. Ladies and gentlemen, this video should be out a little bit early than compared to my usual upload schedule. I usually try to aim for Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday and Friday. Those are my uploading days. So obviously I've been able to get this video out a little bit earlier than that, but just as a heads up, I'm going away for the second half of this week. And as a result of that, next week there might not be any videos till Wednesday or Thursday. But anyway, in the meantime though, let's focus on our consolidation of Mesopotamia. So in the last episode, we took over Seleucia, which is now our new capital. And now though, now that we've taken the massive, very prestigious capital, or ancient capital of the Seleucids, I should say, now it is time for us to secure food and secure trade in the region. And to do that, we need to take Charax. Charax is a port city down here facing towards the Indian Ocean. If we can take this, it will not only guarantee food for our people, but also wealth. So let's do it. And here we are on the battlefield with our new Babylonian spearmen. They're basically Babylonian hoplites, except they don't have the hoplite formation for some reason. But this will be their first proper use under Parthian rule, so that would be very interesting. Hopefully those guys do live up to their very, very impressive stats. They seem like they're going to be very awesome. The Greek garrison, as usual, cannot stand waiting in the settlement, and instead of holding their positions, they end up charging out in a very uncoordinated manner. We have our spearmen in the center, presenting an infantry line to the enemy, while on the left and right hand flanks we have various horse skirmishers and archers raining fire down into the side of the enemy. So far it's looking pretty good, although the Greeks do have a very large amount of men defending the settlement. However, thankfully, at least half of those men are coming in fleet ships, or warships basically, and as a result of that, they won't be in very large groups, and they will also be unloading from the ships in a very awkward manner. So in the meantime, we're actually having a field day with their garrison of infantry. A lot of their weaker units are getting decimated by our horse archers, who are now moving in here. You can see they're moving in along the right hand flank to try and get some shots into the enemy from behind. Their shields will give them a lot of protection, but shields will not stop a cataphract charge. And as you can see here, the cataphracts of Parthia are charging in very nicely into the backs of these Greeks. As the battle continues though, the fleets do begin to dismount their troops from their ships. All of these troops are basically archers, so what we're having to do is send out our lighter, faster cavalry to go and charge them down and basically engage them as quickly as possible before they can actually let off all their volleys of arrows. So in the meantime though, we've basically dealt with the majority of the garrison. It's just these fleets that are now landing their ships that we really have to try and deal with very quickly. If we just sit around and let them come to us and get involved in the main fight, they'll get a lot of flanking fire in. So you can see me trying to micromanage very quickly on the left hand flank, since they landed about half their fleet in town and then the other half on our left hand flank there. But for the most part, things go pretty much perfectly in this battle. Our horse archers are doing nicely on the charge into these lightly armored troops, and our cataphracts are coming in here and decimating the rear of the enemy here. Even though they're in a very disciplined formation, these Greeks are not something to be messed with. Even though they're just a petty garrison, they are still fairly professional. However, our Babylonian heavy spearmen combined with our cataphracts and horse archers is just way too much for the Greeks to handle, and the Babylonians passed their first test with flying colors. Here are these statistics if you do wish to see them. As you can see though, the Babylonian spearmen did fantastic. They're the two top spearmen units on the top left hand side of the screen. Got over 200 kills on a single unit, which is very devastating considering we didn't really go up against any cavalry. So the garrison falls. We end up dealing with a couple little small navies that were just outside of Charax, ready to reinforce it. And we get an excellent food source. Charax actually has a lot of food available. So because of that, we will not only be able to take Seleucia, but now we can hold it in a fairly sustainable manner. However, we do not have time to sit and redecorate the new capital. Instead, we have to keep pushing as quickly and as hard as we can. We send spies up to the north and to the west, and we see Hatra is basically the next settlement on our hit list. However, it does have a massive army of Seleucid troops inside the city, and they're also very, very good. The Seleucids have one of the best military rosters in the game, and these guys are definitely not holding back in their recruitment. They have the best pikes, some of the best swordsmen, and excellent cavalry. Thankfully, though, Charax has been able to bait them out, and they're actually attacking us across the river here. So now we need to hold off against this force, wipe it out, and take more settlements. And here we are on the battlefield. We are looking at the south side of the battlefield where we have a small bridge here. We have our small detachment here. We just have some horse archers combined with some spearmen in the center. Not our heavy Babylonians, but actually mercenary Arab spearmen who will be fairly helpful. They're nowhere near as heavy as the Babylonians though, but their large spears and good shields that they also have will help hold the bridge against any enemy cavalry charging across, which we are expecting quite a few. They had a lot of cavalry in their army, so hopefully our men can hold the bridge. But it is a fairly tight gap. But what isn't tight though is the river crossing. So to the south here on the right side of the screen, you can see there's the bridge, but to the left in the north we have our main army focus because they have a very wide gap on the river here that they can ford across. So this is going to be a big issue. So our defensive setup is we have some mercenary archers here on the left hand side of our little squadron. They should be getting some very nice shots into the enemy from the flank. We have cataphract horse archers here, which will be loosing their arrows before they charge into the enemy, so they'll be very helpful in two ways there. Then of course we have our Babylonian spearmen taking up the center. They did fairly well so far, but that was with only just 2 units, so now we've recruited quite a few more units. It's been a couple turns since our last battle. Hopefully they will be able to hold their ground against the very elite Seleucids they're now facing off against. There's Archinines first on his horse, leading from the rear, and then behind him though we have our median skirmisher cavalry, which will be basically acting as a reserve. Although initially in the battle we will move them up pretty quickly. So the battle begins, and we have our cataphract horse archers initiating their Cantabrian circle on the flanks. This is to make sure that they don't get hit by enemy fire, while they're also still loosing their own arrows. Our spearmen have moved up to the riverbank, and the Seleucids are sending a massive amount of melee-focused infantry and cavalry and elephants at our main battle line there. Back to the south, the Seleucids are sending forward a mixture of shock cavalry and some fairly decent skirmishers. So skirmishers is going to actually do a lot of damage to our spearmen if they're allowed to continue to do so over time. Back up in the north though, things are looking kind of mixed. We're wiping out their elephants and their cavalry aren't able to get any decent charges. However, they have fantastic swordsmen and pikemen coming up against us, and we actually had to go into disciplined formation in order to hold against the elephants, and as a result of that, the enemy cavalry is now sneaking along the river and basically just running around our own infantry. So to try and stop that, we've had to preemptively charge our horse shock units into the enemy. But the battle line is going okay so far, but our infantry are definitely getting worn down very, very quickly. Back in the south, things are looking very, very good actually. Even though the enemy does have skirmishers that have dealt quite a bit of damage to our infantry, our horse archers are doing very, very good work. However, again, the enemy cavalry is trying to just pull through our units and get around them. Here they were fairly successful, however, by the time they managed to pull through, our horse archers had already done the work necessary. But back on the north side though, things are looking very, very bleak indeed. Our Babylonian spearmen held for a very long time, however, it's now been far too long. Our cavalry have pretty much used all their ammunition, and the Seleucids have received their reinforcements that they had coming from the rear of the map, and as a result of that, we've now had to retreat our cavalry and leave the Babylonians to their fate, which is basically to get wiped out. However, it's not all terrible. Now we are able to actually basically dissect the enemy infantry and start conducting our little Parthian sandwich tactic here, where we'll charge them from multiple sides at once so they can't really brace appropriately for a charge defense. And we picked them off fairly quickly over time, so it's actually not too much of an issue that we've lost most of our infantry. On the south side, we're actually pushing forward the remnants of our infantry to deal with some enemy skirmishers and cavalry, while our horse archers are actually dealing with a single unit of Seleucid cav that managed to get across the bridge and basically sneak around. But they will get outflanked and charged from multiple sides, so that's basically a non-issue. We will lose a few horse archers because of it. They're not very good in melee or extended melee, but we kind of have to deal with what we have, so not too many options there. But in the meantime, back on the north side, the enemy infantry are pushing deep into our territory, basically, and as a result of that, they really can't stand... wow, that bloke went flying. They can't stand in a single formation. Instead, they're being dragged out by our cavalry, and our cavalry, again, are just conducting little Parthian sandwich tactics, hit them from the rear, hit them from the front, and we're just doing very nicely in dissecting these very elite infantry. Because they are elite though, and they have such good training and discipline, they take quite a few rear charges to begin to retreat, but since we're now able to rear charge them on the side of a hill as well, we will break these elite swordsmen, and we'll also hopefully be able to break the rest of their infantry as they come up. Speaking of which, here we are in what is hopefully going to be our final charge. We have surrounded the enemy's pikemen and swordsmen here, and instead of trying to split them off, because these guys are already wavering, the enemy general has already fled the field, we're going to do a massive all-out charge across the entire front line here. We get some devastating charges downhill into the pikemen. The pikes face the completely wrong way. We get charges coming in from the left-hand side here, hitting them from the side, and then we also get charges coming from downhill. And with just so many side and rear charges coming in all at once, the enemy well-trained Seleucids actually rout from the field instead of fighting to the death. As you can see there, we did take some very heavy losses. We lost over 1,000 men, and most of them were basically our infantry, although we did take some casualties in the horse archer department as well. Although thankfully not too much. It was also our cavalry skirmishers that took quite a bit of damage. So all in all, we wiped out the enemy army, but they were able to inflict so many casualties on us that we weren't able to follow up and take the city of Hatra in the following turn. In addition, we actually had a massive drought occur, and we had an extreme summer happen just after that battle had completed. So not only is our army already decimated, at least large sections of it, but now the environment is against us and we're suffering heavy attrition. So we're going to have to wait a turn until summer passes, and we'll have to basically retreat and spend a few more turns recuperating our forces. In the meantime though, we are still sending out spies into the west. We're trying to find the rest of the Seleucid forces. It seems like they basically just have a few scattered armies out here that have about half a dozen units each, which isn't a lot, but when you combine those armies with the garrisons, it really does help them quite a fair bit. So it is a little bit dangerous, and we will need to be careful when we begin actually pushing on these northern and western settlements. But like I said, in the meantime, we're going to have to pull our armies back and spend a few turns recuperating. However, the diplomacy department once again works against us. Pergamon has now joined the Seleucids. They are a defensive ally, and as such, they're now joining them in their defense against our invasion. We did also manage to complete an objective mission, so that will help us out financially. But in the meantime, what won't help is Pergamon declaring war. They are fairly far away though, as is Lydia, who has also joined the war against us. So hopefully it means they won't really have too much of a part in it. But basically, any ally that the Seleucids has that is joining in the fight means that the Seleucids will be less willing to take any peace deal that we offer, if we so wish to. However, we do have diplomacy of our own. Even though we're playing on higher campaign difficulty, we've actually been able to do some decent diplomacy. And one of our allies that we liberated, the Persian faction in northern Syria, has actually agreed to join the war against the Seleucids. So now we have our Median allies and these Persian allies joining in, and they'll distract them in the north. So now that the north is taken care of, we're looking to the south. We've finally discovered the Ptolemies, And now that we've discovered them, we're going to immediately begin negotiating with them for various different things. Basically, what we end up with is a massive amount of money. They're basically financing our war against the Seleucids. They've been at war since the beginning of the Seleucid formation. And because of that, the Ptolemies are more than happy to throw money our way, throw it down the drain against, for us, so that we can send our men against the Seleucids and basically waste our manpower taking their cities and settlements. But we're more than happy to do that. We need money desperately, and the Ptolemies could be an excellent ally. It is unfortunate we have to ally with the Greeks, since the Bactrians have left a sour taste in our mouth in dealing with Greeks, but overall it's the right thing to do. Now our treasury is looking very nicely. In the meantime, Artanes I is leading an assault on Hatra. We did fight the battle manually, but I won't bother showing you guys that. It was fairly straightforward. We did take some casualties, but all of those were basically reduced to just our mercenaries and some AOR units that we had, so they can be replaced very easily. Basically, we now control all of Mesopotamia unopposed. We do have our Armenian allies that have already taken Edessa, which is kind of annoying because we want Edessa, but at the same time, I'll take that over the Seleucids having it. So, but really now Mesopotamia is now ours, which is fantastic. And as a result of that, though, Artanes I is now sick of leading the troops in the field. He's 40 years old at this point. He thinks that it's time to try and live the quiet life. He's going to go back to Seleucia and enjoy the pleasures that the large metropolis has to offer. And so while he's doing that, the son of Arsaces I, Arsaces II, will be leading the army that has been recruited. Our Babylonians and Parthians and Medians will all be marching together underneath his banner. In addition, they'll also be marching under the first name that any of our armies ever held, which is basically that of his father. So Arsaces II is now leading troops that will be very loyal and devoted to him, because the army name and the army history is basically born from his father, who was assassinated a few videos ago.
There is a fine line between failure and great glory.
In the meantime, though, Arsaces II is not playing around. As soon as his troops are ready to march, he marches, and he marches on Tura. Tura is a very important settlement for us. It is in a strategically excellent position to protect our western frontier. In addition, it also has glassware and a decent population size for us to recruit from. We did fight the battle manually, but again, I'm not going to bother showing. It was fairly straightforward, and we have a much juicier battle to show later on in the video. We take the settlement. We again take some fairly heavy casualties on the infantry side of things. However, don't get mistaken, our Babylonian infantry are doing fantastic work. It's just that they are getting caught out on their own, because our style of fighting isn't based around infantry. And because of that, we will be suffering losses, at least until we really start to reform our army to be more infantry based. But having completed his first military foray under Artanes I, Arsaces is actually going to be getting married. It's time for him to continue the bloodline. He is now 30 years old, and this cousin of Arsaces II, Fistaspa, isn't really doing anything productive. He's not really being all that helpful. So because of that, Arsaces now sees that he needs to continue the bloodline, and not only that, but he needs to continue the glory line as well. Arsaces I did a lot for Parthia, and so he needs to do a lot for Parthia if he's ever going to have a chance of being Shah. And in the spirit of regaining glory, at least for the Arsacid dynasty, he now will be marching his troops against Palmyra, one of the massive fortresses under the Seleucid control. Alrighty, so this is going to be a big battle, and it's going to be a very different battle. Big how? Well, first off, we're attacking Palmyra, and actually we're not even attacking, we're defending. We besieged the settlement for a turn, and then the garrison felt very confident in coming out and attacking us, so we're fighting outside the settlement. But Palmyra is in an excellent position strategically. It basically is a gateway to the south into Egypt, or north into Anatolia. we can control Palmyra, we'll have a very excellent inland and safe position to begin recruiting and reorganizing our forces. But as you saw at the beginning of this battle, though, we are basically leaving our infantry on the side of a mountaintop while our cavalry are down in the plains here, skirmishing the enemy to death, basically. The enemy elite infantry is at the front here with the cavalry on the side, and because we're micromanaging our troops in such a manner, we're basically frustrating the enemy army to want to go in and charge into our cavalry straight on, which is not a good idea. They don't want to be doing that. Even though the Seleucids have fantastic cavalry here, they're getting absolutely decimated by our cataphracts, and our horse archers are doing damage as time goes on, so that's very helpful as well. We also even have elephants that are now getting involved, since we now are invading basically what would be southern Syria, or Palmyra now. We now have access to Syrian heavy elephants. We can recruit them as an AOR unit and as a mercenary, and this is the AOR unit variant. And they're going to be incredibly helpful for us. The elephants are devastating on the charge against cavalry. And our own cav are fantastic as well. So we basically end up wiping out all of the enemy cavalry very, very quickly. And because of that, the enemy infantry, being as professional as they are, they actually pull back and wait until the reinforcing garrison of the city of Palmyra itself actually comes onto the battlefield and reinforces them. As time goes on, the garrison army now finally gets onto the field, and they will be joined by these Seleucid silver shield pikemen and some excellent silver shield style swordsmen. So we do need to be careful of that. However, the cavalry capacity is now very limited to just the 2 or 3 cavalry units that they have coming from the garrison. So we can begin our skirmishing once again, and we're basically just loosing volley after volley after volley upon the enemy. And there isn't a lot that they can do. Again, we managed to frustrate the enemy cavalry into charging into unfavorable circumstances, and because of that, the noble archer cataphracts that we have and Arsaces himself will be providing some beautiful sandwich charges against the enemy, and the Parthian sandwich will gobble up the Seleucids as it always has. Not only are we doing some nice sandwich charging, but again, our horse archers are basically leading the enemy cavalry right into the mouths of our elephants. They even end up charging directly into our elephants on a downhill charge, but it doesn't matter if it's downhill, uphill, or sideways hill. The elephants will dominate cavalry in a charge, especially in a head-on collision with the enemy cavalry charging into them. So basically the entire enemy cavalry force is now finally wiped out, and now we have to focus on the infantry of the enemy. And so now our infantry are going to finally get involved in the fight. They're still sitting on the side of this mountaintop. However, our archers, which are now 3 units strong, are engaging the enemy at a very large distance. Our Babylonian spearmen are in front of them, and we also have some Mesopotamian mercenaries helping on the lower side of the mountain on our right-hand flank. The Greek garrison now basically consists of spearmen and hoplites and archers, and the hoplites will advance up the hill slowly, but while they do so, the enemy skirmishers get left behind. And even here, our horse archers, which aren't even charging cavalry, actually charge in and wipe them out very, very quickly. So the enemy loses their capacity to skirmish with us very early on in the battle. But now that that's happened, the enemy main battle line is now engaging with our main battle line of infantry. And things are looking pretty good so far. We have all of our cavalry intact. We still have our archers. However, our spearmen will be put to the test. We have silver shield pikemen coming up against them, along with the massive amount of militia troops coming out from the city. Thankfully, though, we are still holding our ground high on the hill, and our archers will be loosing volley after volley over the tops of our Babylonians and down into the ranks of the enemy Greeks. While that's happening, though, we do have a little bit of an emergency. Over here on the rear side of the hill, the enemy infantry actually found a gap where they could climb over the mountain and come in our main battle line from behind. So what we've had to do is send one single unit of Babylonian spearmen to halt 5 groups of enemy infantry over here. There's a lot of them in this big blob right here. However, in true Parthian style, we answer a problem with a Parthian answer, and that is by sending in the cavalry. The cavalry are the answer to any problem in Parthia, and they are going to be here as well. We're basically recharging the enemy with our skirmishers and our horse archers. Not the best cavalry to be using to recharge the enemy, but regardless, they will still get the damage done over several charges over time. Meanwhile, on the main battle line, the Silver Shields are now engaging our fairly ill-disciplined Mesopotamian spearmen here. However, our elephants are starting to get involved in the infantry fight here. The Silver Shields are the most elite of the elite though, and so they will take a couple charges to actually be decimated, but the second charge from our very good elephants will be enough to finally break them. At this point as well, the general has been routed from the battlefield, and so the Silver Shields are definitely feeling betrayed. They won't be sticking around for too long. While our elephants cause havoc up on the mountain, charging across the entire rear of the main infantry battle line, Arsakis is waiting for the right moment to send his cavalry forward and to begin trying to peel off more of their units, and so he picks that moment right now. The elephants are busy charging to the main battle line of infantry, so he's basically trying to time his cavalry to basically force the enemy pikemen who are in reserve and are trying to get to the battlefield to turn and face him, and he won't actually even be charging into them, but he will still be the reason that they will all get killed, because him and the noble archer cavalry behind them force them to get completely out of position, and then they get recharged by our Mesopotamian spearmen, which is fantastic. They don't even get to get their pikes down before they get recharged. After our elephants decimated the enemy's main battle line, they're now charging over the hill into the battle line or battle group that was trying to recharge our own battle lines. So basically, our elephants have annihilated one entire group of enemy soldiers, and then they go down and annihilate another. And here is the remnants of the battle. The Greek soldiers are now routing entirely en masse. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, Arsakis II leads a massive victory over the Seleucids. Here are the statistics if you do wish to see them. As you can see though, all of our troops did fantastic. Elephant's amazing. Arsakis himself killed nearly 500 men with his own hands. Babylonian spearmen did fantastic. It was an excellent battle all around, and not only did Arsakis win against an army that was arguably better than his own, but he also won in a very decisive manner, taking only 251 casualties. That's almost nothing. That's very, very small and minor, and that means is that now that we've taken Palmyra, we don't have to sit around and wait and recuperate. Instead, we can continue our march. However, the question remains, where will the march go next? Well, we'll have to wait until the next video, but basically our options are to continue north into Antioch and take out these Seleucids once and for all, or do we get peace with them, turn around and focus back on our sworn enemy, the Bactrians? I'll leave that decision up to you all in the comments down below, but until then, thank you all for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I shall see you in the next one.